It's wonderful to be here. I recall last year when I was here, I was speaking. I'm so excited this year that all I'm going to be doing is asking questions to our very amazing and distinguished panel. So they're going to be doing all the work while I'm just going to be sitting here and just absorbing. And I hope all of you are going to be doing the same thing. So I'll just do a really quick introduction of myself, and I'm also going to be asking my amazing panel to introduce themselves. I'm Olivia Wong, and I'm with MTR, looking after the environmental and social responsibilities. That's just my day job. But I do want to also share, and as Emery reminded me, that I am the chairperson of Habitat for Humanity Hong Kong. I sit on their board, and I have been a passionate volunteer with them for the last 16 years. I'm very proud as well. So that's my other job. I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Bonnie Hayden Cheng. I'm a professor of management and also the MBA program director at HKU Business School. My research is very much around corporate wellness, and that centers around helping leadership teams to build better environments and better cultures and better teams where their people can thrive. I'll just do a little bit of shameless self-promotion because all of that work has culminated in a book that I just wrote called The Return on Kindness. And that's really, the ROK is really a play on ROI because the book really unpacks all of the hard line or bottom line impacts of kind leadership on retaining talent, on building loyalty, and also creating successful companies. That intersects wellness, it intersects mental health, DEI, and all of these wonderful topics that we're discussing today. I guess two more roles that I want to mention just because it's relevant to today is that I am sitting on the Male Allies Leadership Council for the Women's Foundation. And also, I am one of the new co-chairs, I think some of them are here also, of the Future of Work Committee with the American Chamber of Commerce. So I'm very interested in talking and connecting with you all and look forward to the session.
So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Cheris, coming from MTL. I'm the Chief of Operating also for the Metro segment, actually looking after the safe and reliable operations of the railway in Hong Kong, and also responsible for the business management of the Metro segment. So I have been working in the railway operations field for almost 30 years, and I'm working in the front line all the times, almost all the times. And I am also glad to work with Olivia and Sim, and was one of the chairman of the Gender Equity Forum in our company. And also, I'm also the vice chairman of the Women for Logistics Transport of the CILT Hong Kong. So very glad to be here to share our experience with you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, kind of hard to follow after all that. Kind of wish I sat right next to Olivia. Morning, everyone. My name is Megan Lam. I am the CEO and co-founder of Neurum Health. Neurum Health is a digital health company. We are born and bred out of Hong Kong. And what we do is we personalize care for every mind's growth and healing at scale. And really what we do best is, Ricky earlier mentioned about universal design. That's a really core value and principle of ours. So, regardless of your background or where you are in terms of the mental health spectrum, we want to make you feel that you have a solution that you feel like you can see yourself using and that you belong on this mental health journey. We also have a strong impact model. So organizations that work with us, we have something called care credits, whereby you can go see a coach, a therapist, to your choosing. You have a lot of selections. We heard earlier about LGBTQ inclusion and being able to have the choice. So those care credits can be pledged, and at the end of the year we would work with an NGO, so the local community can also have access to the level of care without having to work in a big bank or an insurer, for example. We take care of about 2 million people today, and my background is in neuroscience and mental health, and I sit on the board of Kelly Support Group, which is a youth mental health charity.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm just saying that I am in awe with the panel here. So I'm excited. I'm actually not actually have to sit on the panel. So as many of you know me, that I love data. So you know that you can't get away from not hearing at least a little bit of data from me to kickstart. So now, according to the latest survey that was done, the Hong Kongers' happiness level has dropped to a 3-year low from 7.26 in 2021 to about 6.57 in 2023. And the largest drop is actually amongst the 19 to the 24 years old. Also, according to the latest World Happiness Report, and I bet all you didn't know there's one, but go and Google it, there is one, ranked Hong Kong at 82 on the happiness scale. Now that's below Nepal at 76, below China at 64, Singapore happiness ranked. I know people are like, oh my God, but we have Singapore audience. So I just want a big shout out to the audience in Singapore. You're ranked 25 in the world and actually is the highest in Asia. And you all can clap if you are Singaporean. So another survey that was released actually by the health department that was conducted with over 330,000 students have found, and this is actually rather sad, that 3.7% of the secondary school students have considered suicide. And with that, it's basically 50% higher than those numbers in 2018, 2019. And about 1.6% of them have actually tried to take their own lives. I think actually even more alarmingly than when we talk about the secondary school students is that 2.4% of the primary school students have considered suicide. Primary school students, I kind of want to emphasize that again. And 1.1% of them have actually tried to take their own lives. So I do want those numbers to sink in. So I'm going to make this a difficult transition to start with Bonnie. So I think, we talked a little bit about the, happiness ranking. We talked about the sort of mental, fitness. So Bonnie, maybe you can share with us, firstly, definition. What is happiness? And what is emotional fitness?
Thanks, Olivia. Well, just listening to the statistics that you just pointed out, that's a little alarming. So I actually want to, if I can, get some audience participation and ask if you could all, by a show of hands, who would say here, I am happy? Okay, that looks like a good proportion of us. Not surprising, because we're in this beautiful space, enjoying a wonderful discussion today about mental health. And also we had that wonderful mindfulness section. But this is a big group. If you were in my classroom with a smaller group, I would probably kind of pick some of you to tell me what was the criteria that went through your mind when you made that determination of, am I happy, yes or no? So for us academics, we actually don't call it happiness. We call it subjective well-being, because happiness is really a very deeply personal, very internal kind of experience, right? So sure, we can fake happiness. I could say to you, Olivia, you look happy today, and certainly there are people suffering from depression who are capable of putting on a happy face. How we study happiness, happiness tends to cover multiple dimensions of well-being, the first being an affective well-being. So if you think back to, did you put up your hand or not, maybe you made a determination about affective well-being, which represents kind of this positive feeling or positive emotion, positive mood towards joy and energy. And maybe you woke up today and you felt it's going to be a good day, and yes, I'm happy. So maybe your determination was, today specific rather than overall assessment of your happiness. The second component of happiness is around what we call eudaimonic well-being. Excuse me. And eudaimonic well-being is more about this ability to find meaning and purpose in our life. So for some of you, maybe your assessment of, am I happy or not, maybe your mind flickered to, do I feel like I have a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in my work or in my life? And then the final component of happiness is probably the one that most of us kind of go to when we think about our own levels of happiness, and that's around an evaluative well-being. And that's, an average or overall, looking at our life overall, would we say that we have a good quality of life, right? So that's more about a life satisfaction. So those are the three kind of components of happiness. But I think one important point to raise here in talking about, happiness in relation to mental health is it's important to point out that the absence of depression or the absence of sadness does not mean that one is happy, right? They're independent constructs. And so this is, we can think about the applications to mental health, and we can think about the applications to our workplace, knowing these kinds of different facets of happiness and also what happiness is not. I think you had a second question.
No, yes, I do, actually. And actually just kind of right on that. You talked about just the absence of depression doesn't mean that you're happy, right? Great. So I guess the thing is that, so in Hong Kong, we looked at some of the statistics about our happiness ranking, all these things. So if I don't use the word that Hong Kong or people in Asia have anxiety or depressed, just because we have absence of depression, however, we may still not be happy. So I think in Hong Kong, because our ranking is not exactly high, why do you think that is the issue? Why do you think Hong Kong people, while maybe is the absence of depression, doesn't mean that we're happy? Why do you think?
Yeah. That's a loaded question, Olivia. And if we had the answer to that, I think we'd all be in a higher ranking, I think, in the World Happiness Scale. I think that's a big challenge for, organizations, right? When we think about how do we tackle mental health? Because the same thing there, right? The absence of mental ill health does not mean that you are mentally well. If we think about happiness or mental health being on this continuum, just preventing burnout or preventing stress doesn't necessarily mean you're on that right side of the scale where you're thriving or flourishing. Mostly people kind of hover in the middle. I think during COVID-19, all of us would agree that we're simply just trying to survive. So to answer your question about why, there's so many factors here that I think we need to consider, and I think we will continue to unpack in the session that's around not just genetic predisposition, individual differences, but also societal pressures that we feel here in Hong Kong, political environment, social relationships, all of those factors at play.
Great, thank you so much, Bonnie. So, of course, then now we move to on a more on a practical level within the workplace. So Cheris, as you mentioned, you have worked your entire amazing career, really working with a lot of the frontline staff. And then, generally, I suppose in all kind of, this type of customer relation-related type of job nature, there's a lot of unexpected events. We see that on the news all the time. So then, how do you actually identify or address, the issues from your team, when you see that there are maybe, mental health issues that's popping up?
Yes, thanks, Olivia. I think it's true that frontline jobs may be sometimes quite stressful, especially during special unexpected events. But as we mentioned by Bonnie, I think it's very important for us to instill the stress, the mindset of the purpose of what my frontline staff is doing. In our company, we stress very much that the purpose of the company is to keep Hong Kong and keep cities moving. So it's not just for the railway part, because we convey people, we are doing the transportation systems, but we also build the properties, etc. We try to promote the better life and better quality of life and to keep the cities moving. So I think this kind of purpose is particularly important for my staff, especially when they are working for the front line. They know that no matter how difficult it is, because you know the intensity of Hong Kong Railway. We're carrying more than 5 million passengers a day. So the intensity is very high, but they have a purpose. So I think with that purpose, that can help them to get through quite a number of the challenges. And also they understand the kind of job nature they're having. And of course, I think from the very beginning, from the recruitment, we're trying to instill some job tasting. And I think expectation management is also very important. So I think we never heighten up the intensity of our work as the frontline staff, but we try to show about the work environment within the driving cabs of the trains and working stations. And I think we tell them what happened. And of course, very, very important that we give them sufficient training to deal with any unexpected situations. So every of our frontline staff, they have lots of training before they take up the post. They have on-job training as well, apart from the classroom training. And even after the training, they have the mentors, they have the peer support. And then after that, we have regular drills to make them more prepared to handle any unexpected events. So I think psychological preparedness is much more important for them to prepare to handle the stress at that work level. And of course, there may be really times that our staff suffer from mental issues. I think it's quite easy to identify the symptoms because our supervisors and managers are trained that actually given with the skills to identify colleagues with problems. And if you discover that they have changes in the behavior or very substantial changes, or they display a signs of emotional feelings like always cried and very depressed, or their performance dropped and they increase their absenteeism, and also I think they keep their social life isolated, then there are signs that, our supervisors in their daily interactions, they need to, they can, and they have the skills to identify what problems with our staff.
Great, thank you, Cheris. I actually have a follow-up question, but I'm going to ask that later. But I'm going to, because we talked a bit, we touched on in terms of the stress, the challenges that we're faced, and I kind of want to, now move on to Megan. Of course, generative AI is all the rage. I'm not talking about ChatGPT, as Steph says. It's not just about ChatGPT. It's generative AI. Now, some people would think that is actually causing a lot of stress because, people are thinking, oh my God, they're going to take over my job. I'm not going to be able to work anymore. So maybe, Megan, if you can, you work with technology, so can you share some of the examples in terms of how technology is actually being utilized to enhance mental health awareness, and also to try to hopefully eliminate some of the stress that, as Cheris mentioned, some of maybe her colleagues may face, but then also in terms of the supporting the various organizations, whether it's in Hong Kong or in Asia.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Olivia. I think I want to just preface by saying when it comes to technology, and it's really just a paintbrush if we're thinking about painting a future that's more inclusive, healthier. Technology is really just a paintbrush. You can paint a Caravaggio or you can paint a Monet. That's down to how we utilize that. For us, tech must always be human first. It's always about the people, because if there's no adoptability, if it's not relevant for people, if you can't see yourself using it, then it might as well not be there. So at least the way we see technology and using tech for good, meaning you're building technology to support people, but it lasts, it's sustainable, is that we want to make sure that we can use AI to really meet people where they are. One of the speakers used this exact line earlier. And really, so I want to just say there's like 3 key things. One is to raise self-awareness. We heard earlier EAP usage is 5%, which is very low, but compared to 1% and 4% in previous years that we've seen, I thought, oh, that's an improvement, but that's still very, very low. One of the key reasons, and we understand that, yes, there is stigma, and there's kind of a fear and judgment behind it, and sometimes when we introduce resources internally, people don't use it, is because sharing one story is, we've seen that people just simply don't know what that resource is for. They think, well, I've seen things on the news, and, there are, unfortunately, and it's, untrue, but oh, there are these violent attacks and that's associated with illness and I'm not like that, so therefore I am not ill. Or I don't need this resource because this resource is only reserved for crisis situations. I don't think I'm in a crisis and I can keep pushing. I can keep pushing a bit more. So we can use data by just kind of holding up a mirror and just to say, you know, here's kind of where you are, and just as like a quick self-assessment to check in with yourself. The second thing is that we can personalize support. So once you tell people here, you know, hold up the mirror, here's kind of where you are. The next natural question is, right, what do I do next? Now you have that buy-in. What's that next step for me? And everyone has a different journey. Everyone's stepping stone is going to need to be a bit different. For some people, it might be a focus around mindset and, you know, facing everyday challenges when they go to work. For some people, it might be on the other end of the spectrum, where they, you know, may need, you know, more human support. And people kind of need help filtering that out, kind of like a GPS system on where to go. So technology can personalize that at scale, can really have a tailored approach to each person in a very cost-effective way. So, you know, it's not piecemeal, it's not a point solution. And recently, there was an Oxford systemic research that came out, and I think the headline, there was a news report that came out, and the headline was that well-being programs don't work. Of course, you have to, you know, take the next step and actually read the research paper a bit more, but the conclusion is really, the takeaway is, it's not broad blanket, one size fits all, but it's really how do we personalize and make sure whatever you introduce in your organization, A, people actually use it, and B, it actually speaks to people. And technology is one such way that we can do that at scale. And finally, Olivia touched upon, you know, the cultural aspect. And I'm sure, you know, there will be conversations going forward as well, and this doesn't stop, but yes, we do come from a culture where we don't necessarily talk about it openly, but I don't wish for us to stop there. What we've seen is that technology can introduce a very private and comfortable way for people to have support in their palms and pockets, because not everyone is comfortable speaking out. We might have a mental health campaign that says, let's talk about it, but in an environment where that's not necessarily the first, first instinct to do, that can be quite difficult. So it's, again, another stepping stone that meets people closer to where they are. And our stat behind that is that we love to see that 38% of people on our platform, it's their first time seeking mental health support. They've never, sought or tried any mental health resource, but that is, they feel comfortable and confident enough to take that first step. And we also love to see that there is quite an equal gender split. So what we've actually seen is historically women are more likely to go seek human support, but we've also seen an evening out where men also feel comfortable taking that first step as well. So those are 3 key ways.
Great, thank you so much, Megan. Now I know that I have those other questions coming, but I'm gonna test my, that's my panel, don't worry, nothing crazy. Now, I mean, I think one of the things that was really interesting and was touched up on by all the panelists is, in terms of having the ability to understand, having the ability to looking at and having the skills to observe, or having the, understanding the purpose of why, we do what we do, or having, a technology that will help us to, able to share our experience. So I guess the question I'm gonna have, and maybe any of the, but specifically I guess for Cheris and also for Bonnie, is that, we talked about, yeah, sure, we can teach people how to, observe. I mean, how can we also help the individuals in terms of having that kind of culture or mindsets, or building that kind of psychological safety within a space where they actually feel comfortable enough that they would themselves actually comes out and voice out their issues or mental health challenges, rather than waiting and hopefully being spotted by their manager or the supervisor. So what kind of culture are we talking about that we need to build in order for that to happen? Who would like to start first?
I think for the culture actually is coming from the collective behavior of the collective belief and behavior of the team that creates the culture. So sometimes the company policy and the way of working and the facilities and even the way of working of the company, that's very important to create culture. Of course, the one who creates culture is actually from the top. The top team, the top tier of the company needs to have that awareness to build that culture in order to make that success. And at the end of the day, the bonding of the people in the company is very important to create that kind of culture. So if like our company is a caring company, we not only care of our customers, but also very care about our colleagues, our staff. So the culture will be built with that kind of behavior and policies of coming from the top.
I think I would add to that, so Cheris already addressed kind of top-down approaches, and what can individuals do? And I love this question because I deal with it all the time with my students who, as master's students who are about to enter into the workforce. We talk about mental health, we talk about workplace wellness, but inevitably some students will put up their hand and say, well, what can we do since we're not the CEO? We can't change the culture. So we have discussions around, what can you do, right? So let's say you join an organization a few months from now when you graduate, not in a great environment. Do you just leave, or can you try to change and influence the culture? And that really is the point, is that the people are the culture. And so you can influence up, you can create your own teams, and you can form, your own basis of psychologically safe places where, colleagues bond together and have that kind of social tightness where you can share issues around mental health and workplace wellness, and hopefully that catches on, right, at the top levels.
Great. So sounds like that. So aside from, of course, we always talked about role modeling from the top, that each of us as an individual, we also have a role to play in terms of influencing and in terms of building that kind of culture that's around us. Now, I know that supposedly in the last 10 minutes, there will be questions, and I'm kind of looking, but I am not seeing any questions coming up. So then, luckily, well, I'll be waiting, but then don't worry. In the meanwhile, there's no, silence here. We had our 3-minute silence, so I'm sorry. You're going to have to keep hearing, hearing my voice and our panel's voice. So I do actually have a few more questions, and I think especially around, in terms of, again, going back to technology, and I think, with Megan, you mentioned that the possibility of technology actually creating a more equitable place where, people are maybe, more willing to share their inner thoughts. And, and you mentioned as well is that it's not gender specific. So, like in terms of either, men or women, will actually go and actually have that. I guess the thing is that, but often, I think, and we hear it from previous panel and ourselves, that, we do great policies, we put in amazing platforms, but people don't really use them. So, from your perspective, from a technology, and what would be the things, advice that you would give to like employers, that looking to adopt these kind of technology to help them, to help their people to actually utilize that platform, and so then they can create a much more supportive and resilient environment?
That's a big question, and I think it also kind of, I'm just going to piggyback off Cheris and Bonnie as well, but what we've seen is when a leader speaks out about it, so I'll share an actual story from, from our perspective. When we've rolled out to an organization and a leader steps out and they say, well, we're introducing this resource and here's why, that the activation is extremely strong. We've seen historically about 86% of the workforce actually buy into it and, actually engage with their mental health and wellness initiative. So I think there's a lot to be said about leadership saying something, because sometimes, if we don't talk about something, we think that there's no messaging, but actually it could also mean the other way around, which is, kind of the opposite effect of let's not talk about it. So sometimes it's also the things that we don't say that also speaks volumes as well. So Olivia, you mentioned that it's about the technology, but I'd almost say that whenever we roll out the people, the culture, where we roll out into, that's kind of like the canvas for us. Again, we're just the paintbrush.
Great. And just in time, questions are coming through. Great. So I'm looking at these questions. So one of the questions that I think, in terms of, question 2, I think that's kind of interesting, and I'll be open to any of the, at the panel. So it says that, so in a world, I mean, we're in business, many of us are in commercial, for-profit business. We talked about return on investment. And so in some ways, the question is, so how can we ease employee, and we kind of a little bit touch on that, is actually to come forward. We talked about role modeling, of course, but to really discuss mental health because of the fear of repercussion. And we touch on about the culture in Asia where, we are Asian or we are Chinese, we don't talk about our mental health, we don't have any problems. And so, so how can we encourage employees that maybe fear of repercussion or dismissal or even being labeled as, oh my God, something is wrong with you? Who would like to take, looking at Cheris? Okay, great.
I think maybe, actually, I think, as we mentioned, mutual support and also understanding from the peers and supervisors are very important. I think prevention is always better than cure. So from a company perspective, I think it's very much important to have policies and also initiatives on hand to help promoting mental healthiness of the staff. For my company, I think share some of the initiatives that we're having. That we have a very well-structured staff consultative mechanism that we can exchange views and with staff webs on a wide range of topics. It's a very, I always tell my staff, 民生無小事, their livelihood matters. So we can promote a very open and transparent mutual communication between us so that we can solve what they are, the problems in the real life operations. And the second thing, what we are doing is we promote a work-life balance life in our company to prevent mental illness. Actually, we have the Metro Recreation Club in our company. I am actually the chairman of the Metro Recreation Club. What I offer is we have a wide, at several locations, we have clubhouses, offer a wide range of staff entertainment and also fitness equipment, facilities, and karaoke, kitchens. And also we have organized a lot of social gatherings, interest class, wellness class, singing bowls, Pilates, yoga. And colleagues are very happy for some of the back office colleagues. They can have ball games during the lunchtime before going back to work. Or for my frontline colleagues, although they are working in shift, but they can enjoy the facilities at some of those non-peak hours. Of course, not only physically we help their mental healthiness, but also we have the Metro Credit Union. So we encourage saving habits for my colleagues, at least to relieve some of the financial stress. And we offer loans to help them to relieve their financial distress during different stages of their life. So we also offer sponsorship to our colleagues. So as just mentioned, for the MLC, MCU, the Metro Recreation Club, Metro Credit Union, we're just not focusing on the staff themselves. We also help the families. And of course, if they really have mental issues, we offer 24-hour counseling hotline. So it's completely blind to their supervisors, or we do not know that the staff or the families contact the 24 counseling hotlines. And if they need help, we offer free psychiatric consultations. And of course, sometimes I think technology, change is also a stress, Sometimes we want to use technology to help our colleagues, but they find it stressful. So change management, proper change management to identify the pain points and also how to work along with the colleagues together on the engaging them on new processes is also very important to help them to get through all these difficult times.
Great, thank you. Now, I only have 2 minutes, but there was just one question I really have to ask. So it talks about, and maybe it's kind of for Bonnie as well, so you talked about like good quality EAP programs, for employees, but what about for this new generation? What do they actually want from an EAP program?
I just asked my students this yesterday, and number one was work-life balance. And it's really about flexibility. So I think, there is new generations, but in a lot of ways, we all just want that flexibility to feel like we have some control over our own decision-making, how we structure our work, how we make decisions for our own day. And that's, more than anything coming out on top. And I think the question is really about, what should be included, and the best way to answer that, ask your people, right? They will tell you what they want in an EAP. If low take-up rates are an issue, it's probably because, well, one factor is probably because what's being offered is not what's needed by your workforce.
Great, that's a good point. Work-life balance, flexibility, I think that's music to many of our ears, probably not just for the younger generations, and I'm really just asking. I think that's often the situation is that for all, we all make good intention for a lot of companies, but then maybe what we fail to do sometimes is that we fail to ask our people what actually is going to be helpful for them. Now we're down to 45 seconds, so it's gonna be a challenge. I'm just gonna ask this one last question. So if there was going to be one thing, was not even 1 minute, so each of you quickly share a few keywords or takeaway for our audience today. If they walk out today and there was nothing that they remember from the conversation, this is the one thing that they must take away with them. Should we start with Megan at the end and then come to Skip?
Right. I think my one word, if you didn't hear anything I said, is relevance.
Relevance, great.
Relevance.
So for me, it's ABC. So A is appreciate more your colleagues, have a positive environment. And then B is balance your work. I think you need to be very self-awareness about your own mental healthiness before you can help your staff. And the C is communication. Be more open, create open communication environment, and be active listening, and also show empathy when we communicate with our staff.
Mine is to be kind. Kindness matters, it means everything, and it costs nothing.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for our audience today. Please give them a big hand.